Good evening. Tonight I wanted to talk to you about the Dyatlov Pass incident and some of the theories behind it and some of the things I've been hearing. I first heard about this case probably 12 years ago, back when it was still relatively unknown. I know lots of videos on it. I'm going to leave a link to some better videos that fully dive into this whole mystery a lot better than I am here. I'll just give you the rundown of the Dyatlov Pass incident. In the Ural Mountains in central eastern Russia, a group of 9 skiers were all in their 20s. I think one of the guys was in their 30s. They were all younger. They were all went to college together, and they were ski hikers where they hiked a long way and then they skied. And they did all this in sub-zero temperatures out in the cold and snow. They were all experienced, and they basically loved it. This is what these folks did. And what makes this experience so astounding is that they went missing. No one heard from them for a few weeks, and then they investigated what happened, and then they found the circumstances were very odd. And we're going to go over some of that real quick with you right here. Like I said, this is kind of the short version. There's a lot more going on with this. So it was 9 people. They went out on a trip. They were all experienced backpacker skiers. And we're talking sub-zero temperatures. We're talking like 15, 20, 30 below at night. I mean, we're not screwing around here type temperatures. When they found their tent, it was all collapsed in, and they found signs that the main entrance of it, on the opposite side of the main entrance, they found marks and cut marks that they had cut their way out of the tent from the inside going out. And as it said in the official report, some compelling force forced them out into the snow that night. A lot of them were partially clothed. When it's 30 below and you run out of your tent without socks on, or with one sock, or just socks and no shoes, and lightly clothed, you're going to die very quickly one way or another. We're going to look at some of the pictures of the bodies here. So please, this is kind of your graphic warning. If you're shy about this stuff, you've been warned. So what's so striking is that the bodies were found 2 weeks later, I believe. Several of the bodies were found partially clothed, frozen. Some of them, their skin had kind of was very darkened, more so than would be by normal temperature and frost, almost like they had radiation burns. And there are a couple more bodies were found a few weeks later, even further down. We're going to throw up a map here in a little bit and show you exactly what the layout on the hillside and how it went. But these bodies exhibiting radiation marks, some of them had blows to the head, fractures in their skull that weren't life-threatening. Other ones had eyes and tongue removed, which is very, very odd circumstance to say the least. Some of the bodies, like the one you're going to see here, this was the ones that were found much later in kind of a shallow ditch, even further down the hill. There was a tree with broken branches 4 to 5 meters up in the air that maybe one of them tried to climb a tree, or they climbed up the spruce tree or something to get branches. They found some of them were wearing clothes of the other ones. They found some of them had stripped off their clothes, which I know happens in hypothermia sometimes. Right before you go under, you feel warm, and people strip off their clothes. They found some of their feet and other things of some of the ones that died later, a little bit later, they determined to be wrapped in the other clothes. They had parts that were normal with frostbite and parts that weren't, skin that was black on some and not on others. Very odd circumstances. Here we're going to look at a map of how it happened. You can see the tent up on the hillside, 1,500 meters, which is a long, long way to the cedar tree. And you can see where the people were laying there, and Igor Dyatlov it was named after. And then there was a creek, and people were found. The people on the slope there were found earlier, and then the people down towards the creek were found a few weeks even later. So I've heard a lot of people postulate and speculate that maybe Bigfoot or a dogman or some kind of a cryptid-like creature is responsible for this. I really have my doubts. Now, it's not a terrible theory, and I could be wrong. But for me personally, I just don't think that a cryptid is responsible for this. I think the missing eyes, the missing tongue, the no claw marks, the seeming radiation burns, the weird lights that in the sky were seen over the mountain range around that time, I just don't think it was a cryptid. It's a good theory. To me, in the paranormal world, if you ask UFO people, they'll be, oh yeah, it was aliens. If you ask Bigfoot people, they'll be, oh yeah, it was Bigfoot. You ask demonic ghost people, and they'll say, oh yeah, they had an encounter with a demon. Every faction seems to take claim for these type of incidences, and I'm not saying any one of them are right or wrong. I'm just not convinced it was a cryptid in these cases. When the Russian government did their investigation, they said an overwhelming, compelling force was to blame. Now, for someone to leave a tent, I know I've been in situations with bears and other wild animals and Bigfoot encounters when I was inside a house and other sketchy moments inside a tent. When you're inside a tent or a house or a structure, you don't leave it if there's an animal outside. It may just be canvas or thin plastic. It was canvas back then. But you don't just leave your tent. You don't just go out there, which makes me think that if there was a real bright light or something very obvious coming from the entrance, that cutting your way out and running into the darkness might seem like cover. Because if there was an animal outside or a Bigfoot or some kind of a thing roaming around your tent, you wouldn't want to cut your way out, because then you would just be, whatever barrier you had between them would be gone at that point. And if it was reaching inside the tent already, you probably wouldn't have time to cut your way out or do any of that kind of stuff. You'd probably just be gouging and kicking and trying to get your way out of there. So and they didn't find any footprints or any claw marks or blood inside the tent. So I don't think it was an animal or a cryptid that drove them out. And if anything, I think they would have stayed in the tent and probably huddled together. But if there was a bright light or people or an explosion or something out there that was lighting up the front of their tent, that's the only thing I can think that would compel them to push them out to the blackness. Like if a truck or something pulled up, they would try to just escape out the back. Versus a wild animal, I don't think they'd want to remove their shelter and barrier from that. So that's kind of one of the things that always struck me as odd. Now, the placement of the bodies, the odd behavior, a lot of hypothermia sets in and you're not thinking straight. And to run out into the cold in the middle of the night, it's got to be just a terrifying experience in the first place. There are some theories on what happened to these people. Like they saw some secret nuclear test or rocket test. This was 1959, so this was the height of the Cold War was brewing, and Soviet weapons test and American weapons test were at an all-time high at that point. So maybe they saw or were really close to a rocket that went off, or they were near a nuclear blast and the radiation made them do funny things, and it would explain the color in their skin and some of their odd behavior, and maybe peeling off their clothing, feeling like they were burnt. Or they did witness something they weren't supposed to, and the Russian military came in and eliminated these people or drove them off or made it look like an accident. And then since they were the ones investigating it, covered up. Or the local Mansi people, their local tribes of indigenous people came in and drove them off. That was a theory. Then you get into a little more out there theories that some extra dimensional being or something, some compelling force from another dimension or something happened to them. Because a lot of what they've experienced is similar to cattle mutilations with the missing eyes and tongues, which goes into the alien theory or extra dimensional theory. I think all of these could possibly be, I don't know. It's one of those things, if the Russian government knows the secrets and the answer to this, they're not going to let us know. And so all we can do is really guess. The more I look into this case, the more I read deeper into it. It's really hard to determine. It's one of those things where the harder you look, the more you're like, well, I don't know what's going on with this. This is one of those cases, since we've been talking about missing people, this is kind of the granddaddy of all missing people and mysterious accounts. Because it wasn't just some hiker that turned up missing. It was 9 people, and it was pretty well documented. So if you feel I deserve it, please give this video a like, a thumbs up, and please hit the subscribe button. We got a lot more going on. We're going to make some new videos coming out this week. Thank you very much for watching, and please stay safe in the woods.